Hi, I'm Sam Davies, independent City Councillor for Queen Edith, and I'm finding it very hard to believe that it's almost exactly a year ago since the voters of Queen Edith elected me to the City Council. You've probably been inundated with material from the candidates who are up for election this time round, but I thought this might be a helpful point to kind of recap on how the last year's been for me. A few people have asked what the experience has been like, and though I've tried to cover some of it in the regular blogs that I've posted through the year, I guess there is some merit in doing a sort of rounding up. Apologies if my rounding up is interrupted by the intermittent noise of my dog prowling around the kitchen, but hopefully you will be able to differentiate between the two of us. So I think the first thing that people have asked me about is what it's been like to be an independent. I'm the only independent on the City Council. There have been some in the past at various points, but it is still a bit of a novelty. And for me, it's been a very positive experience because I think what it's enabled me to do is work with good people of all political persuasions, swap ideas, vote for what I think are good suggestions from both of the other main parties and my colleagues in the Green Party when they come forward. I haven't really experienced very much negativity at all. I mean, I hope the other parties recognise that I got a pretty walloping mandate from you last year and respect that. I feel like they do. And so I may be the only independent, but I don't feel like I'm alone, is what I guess I'm trying to say. I feel pretty well supported by lots of people, so that's great. Other people have asked about how much time it takes, and the answer I generally give to that is how long is a piece of string. The thing is, being a councillor doesn't really come with a job description, so you can put as much or as little into it as you want and you're able. I put quite a lot into it, and I think that's because I try and think about things not just in terms of individual pieces of casework, but what they tell me about potentially more systemic problems or opportunities, and what might be possible to do with those to make things better. So, for example, someone approaches me with a concern about a planning application. That's important for them in the context of their house or their neighbourhood, but it's also important that we understand a bigger pattern of development within the ward and what needs that might be generating over time. And with that in mind, I was really pleased to see the article in the Community Forum magazine, which came around last weekend, which talks about windfall and talks about how the sum of all those individual planning applications changes the nature of the place over time. But then you can scale up from there as well. So recently I've been doing a lot of work on what's known as the GB1 development site on Walks Causeway, and the need to get a active travel route, a walking and cycling route from the north of that into the rest of the ward, both for the benefit of the people who are going to be living on that site in the fullness of time, but also for the rest of us, because what we absolutely don't need is more car journeys on our streets at the moment. And then scaling up beyond that, there's the issue about the total quantity of growth that the city and the surrounding region can and should accommodate. And that's where stuff like the local plan comes in, and the thinking about what the next iteration of the local plan should contain and what that might mean for our ward. So I guess for me, I'm constantly moving backwards and forwards between different scales and trying to think about things as both situations in their own right, but also what they might mean kind of more globally. Having said that, it's always going to be the case that helping individuals or individual families who are in difficult circumstances is my priority. And I think I've been on a very steep learning curve this year with learning what the tools are to be able to do that, because these problems crop up in so many different ways, and there are so many different agencies who might be relevant in playing a part in solving that individual, that family's problems. So, for example, a family who were experiencing really bad antisocial behaviour from a neighbouring property, and eventually that turned into working with the police to get a closure order on that property so the antisocial behaviour couldn't continue. Also, working with a victim of domestic abuse to try and resolve her issues, working with a disabled resident to try and get her property upgraded so it's suitable for her needs. This is all about working with people who have a problem, and I see my role as being someone who has some convening power and some influence to try and help those people get a resolution to their problems. Sometimes that requires quite a lot of persistent activity. But, it's really important that persistent activity happens, and I'm very happy to put that effort in. In terms of thinking about, the relationship between me as a councillor, residents in the ward, the City Council and other actors, I think things are particularly challenging in Queen Edith. We know this is part of the city where there are many, many, many different bodies involved, all with their own agendas. And it can be really difficult for residents and indeed for councillors at times to pick their way through that rat's nest and work out who is responsible, who's driving things, and where a resident's voice can best be heard. So, for example, you have the City Council, the County Council, the Greater Cambridge Partnership and the Combined Authority, all active in terms of trying to create transport improvements for getting people on off the biomedical campus. And it is confusing, and things do overlap and gaps do open up. And one of the reasons I've forced myself into the discipline of producing a blog every week is to try and help people understand that over time and enrich their understanding of who's doing what and what the proposed projects are. Because I think the sort of knee-jerk manner of local politics as business as normal, where you suddenly discover there's a problem, and even as you discover it, it's probably too late to do anything about it, is really unhelpful. I want people in the local area to really understand the context and understand who's pulling what levers. So I will obviously carry on doing that. I know from comments that I've had back that some of you, well, many of you, I think, find those useful. And that's really good to hear, because it means that we're all then better able to take part in the conversation about what's happening in our area. I'm going to stop now and have a cup of tea because I've been speaking quite a lot. Back in a minute. Okay, so one of the other things I thought would be helpful to touch on is the stuff that I haven't made as much progress with as I would have liked to have done. And I think that's helpful to think about because, again, it flags up some of the things that are going wrong in the system. So one of those for people in the south of the ward is the continued non-arrival of Nightingale Pavilion. And it does beg a belief now that it's 6.5 years since the funding for that was signed off. I have explained in some of the blogs about some of the things that have slowed down progress on that one. Officers got redeployed during COVID. City Council decided that it wanted to improve the sustainability credentials of the building, which required some revisions to the designs and to the allocation of the internal space. But I cannot find the words to describe how frustrated I am that despite regular contact with officers and with the Executive Councillor for Communities, that still hasn't been delivered. And, you know, I'm not happy with where I find myself a year on in terms of not having made more progress with achieving that outcome. And all I can say is that I'm not going to rest until the damn thing's built and in use, no matter how many nudges to the system that continues to take. Secondly, I've already touched on this issue around the northern access from GB1. I've made it very clear. I think it's completely critical that that goes in, and I think it's an abject failure of the planning system if we can't get that in the end. And I'm sure there are, you know, other things where people are frustrated. I know one of the frustrations that comes up repeatedly is when people contact me in good faith about pavement repairs or potholes, and I have to forward them on to the county councillor. I mean, the good thing is that I believe Alex Beckett, who's our county councillor, and I are working really effectively together, but I still think it would be better if we had one authority that could handle all of these issues seamlessly, so you as users don't have to try and pick your way through the system. I do think there are things to be positive about, though. One of the things I did, which, you know, may not sound a lot, but I think is quite significant as a possible pilot for the future, was support a group of residents at the southern end of Hills Road in working with the City Council's biodiversity officer and tree officer to do some work on improving the wildlife corridor either side of the Nightingale exit turn onto Hills Road. And I not only think that's provided a better outcome in terms of biodiversity, but I think that model of helping residents take some ownership of what's going on outside their front doors has to be the right way forward. And the officers who were involved in that work, I think, were similarly positive about it. So if you can see other opportunities for that kind of working in your street, I'd love to hear from you. There's a quote from Desmond Tutu which says something along the lines of it's not good enough to just carry on fishing people out of the river. You have to go upstream and find out where they're falling in the first place. And I think that's probably the approach I take to doing this job. I call it a job. Of course, it is unpaid and does take many hours a week. But I pitched myself to you last year as a problem solver. And that's what I try to do. I try to solve problems for you as individuals, and I try to help you solve your own problems. And I try to help flag up, foresee and resolve things that are going to be problems for us as a community and a neighbourhood. So thank you to everybody who trusted me last year, and there was a big element of trust. Voting for an independent probably felt a bit odd. I hope that you are happy with the choice you made. I welcome your constructive criticism, and I will continue to do what I've been doing to deliver the best outcomes I can for all Queen Edith residents and for this community, because I really care about it. So please let me know how you feel about everything I just said. But I'm here and I want to help. Thank you.